It's no secret that George Lucas took inspiration from the German Third Reich for his original Star Wars trilogy. The best stories are the stories that have already been told. People tend to favor historically influenced tales over fictitious ones. In this case, just a shift in the setting, from Europe to a galaxy far, far away in a futuristic past. The films even start with the words "once upon a time", like a fairy tale. A familiar fairy tale. Also familiar should this phenomenon already be for people who have already seen my video in which I explain the inspiration and historical adaptation for Star Wars. Source of the inspiration for the original 3 films, and therefore also for the masterpieces that were going to change sci-fi cinema forever, was, contrarily to most other sci-fi genres, the past, not the future. A very well remembered past this time, as many Americans fought in the Second World War and therefore made the Nazis become the most iconic villain appearance of all time. A catnip for Hollywood directors these times. The most prominent reference in Star Wars already comes with the costumes. The Imperial officers' uniforms, and even Darth Vader's helmet, resemble those worn by German army members in World War II. These design illusions are a perfect example of a setting shift to a futuristic facelift. The obvious inspiration has been German army and SS officer in terms of color, uniform design and their behavior. It is also fascinating how they reduce the attachments to a minimum and still convey the key appearance. I'm not talking about these monster leg bulges. Minimalism was also the main motive of the Stormtrooper. These assault forces don't only share the common name with the paramilitary fighters who defended the Nazi party. The head designer of Lucasfilms made a video about the motives and concepts behind every clone and Stormtrooper armor in the saga. Originally, the Stormtroopers were stylized as terrifying skeletons in concept arts of Ralph McQuarrie. The characteristic helmets were created by abstracting skulls with their characteristic mimic visualized with black and white color. The skull meant as a sign of terror and a symbol for the suppression of the Empire comes from the manifestation of terror itself, at least for post-war filmmakers. Another symbol of terror, and also much more actual than the Second World War, was the use of mass destruction weapons. The devastating scientific achievement of bombs that can destroy whole cities are portrayed by the Death Star, a devastating battle station that can destroy whole planets. A way more relatable motive for the time of the release of the original trilogy, as our parent generation had to live in constant fear of being nuked overnight. Fear was also the main weapon of the Empire in order to maintain order and stability in this forcefully controlled galaxy. Fear was also the only weapon against hope. So it seems logical that the design of the TIE Fighter as the main fighter spacecraft seeked inspiration from the German Stuka aircraft. Stukas, or in English dive bombers, were mostly light aircraft and were used to attack and bomb ground targets by the German regime during World War II. Beside their very advanced technology and highly trained pilots, the Stukas were feared for their precise and deadly attacks. The Germans took advantage of this questionable reputation and mounted wind-propelled sirens on the wings, which created the iconic plane dive sound. The psychological effect for ground enemies was way more powerful this way than the 1 or 2 small bombs they carried. Talking about TIE Fighters, Star Wars is also the reason we imagine space battles to behave and look like air battles, because in reality they would absolutely not. George Lucas used actual plane combat footage as template because it was better understandable for the viewer. Dogfights between small fighters just seemed more exciting and, you guessed it, familiar then slow space stations trying to float in the same orbit until they meet on a rendezvous point. To expand the space battle in depth, Star Destroyers as carriers and heavy weapon platforms have been added. With their heavy and inert appearance, they resemble big ships in maritime warfare and therefore perfectly fit in the picture of combined maritime World War II warfare. One of the reasons why Star Wars is visually appealing and familiar is because of its use of real-world equipment and gear. So also inspired by Second World War weaponry were the actual weapons in Star Wars. While comparable genres went a step forward and invented small phaser pistols, the designers of Star Wars set clear historic parallels in their choice of weapons. They most of the time didn't even make much changes to their appearance and just added some small details. And they ironically gave the Stormtroopers the most common allied rifle. Yeah, I see I now have to do a video on this one too. To sum it up, similar to Nazi Germany, the Galactic Empire is a dictatorship based on rigid control of the society that dissolved a previous democracy and is led by an all-powerful supreme leader. The Empire, like the Nazis, desires the creation of a totalitarian order and utilizes excessive force and violence to achieve their goals. Advantages for the few who are favored by the imperial government, and negative for those who resist or are seen as inferior. As an allusion to the Holocaust, the Empire also commits genocide and deportation on non-human species. To sum up, they also use the same colors as the Nazi regime, black, white, and the red in their flag and designs.